It's been a full year since Dad took over his new job. We find out how he's been doing since then. How's it been, Judge?
Well, it still is hard to get used to hearing that.
Yeah.
And when somebody says Your Honor, is like, ooh, oh, geez, who's standing
That,
behind me?
yeah, who's thinking that, so when I first got into the military, I'm trying to start my stopwatch because I'm so discombobulated today. But the one of the first things that, and I have since gotten over it, but it took me about 2 years, was sir. They kept calling me sir, and like people who are older than me are saying sir.
Right.
So it's like, I get it. I 100% understand where you're coming
Yeah.
from with that because, yeah, hey, Judge, hey, Your Honor. Like, it's just a
Right.
completely different mindset as to where you're
It
at.
is. But you know what? Uh, the prosecutors, defense people, they're very, very mindful. And it's not me. It's the institution, as
Yeah,
it should be. And I mean,
right.
I actually conduct myself a little bit differently than I normally would because Um, I call people Mr. Ms. Their last name. I mean, it's an institution, and it has some reverence to it. I mean, there's some weightiness there that when you take somebody's and it was put to me this way, I didn't come up with this, but it really is in the background all the time when you have the um ability or the responsibility to take somebody's their liberties or their treasure.
Yeah,
I don't take that lightly,
yeah,
and so it's a definitely a learner. I don't care who you are, even if you are an attorney. I'm a lay judge. There's very few states that do that, and because we are not attorneys in this lower court or uh, court of lower jurisdiction is what it's called in Montana, then we have to have a ton of training, and it's been upheld by the U.S. Supreme Court that we can do this because the training is rigorous, and we're overseen by the state Supreme Court
well, and I
every
would
six
say,
months.
well, going back to like the founding fathers though, because that's what you're alluding to, a lot of things there: sovereignty,
Right,
liberty, stuff. These were things that were extremely important to them 250 years ago.
right,
And you know that is important because I think, their whole intent was, it wasn't to have career politicians and stuff, but it was to
right,
have people who were providing civil services to their communities, whether it be at the national, state, or local level. And that's what you're doing, is you're doing it at the
right,
local level. I feel like that is important though, to be able to not necessarily be a lawyer by trade, but still be able to partake in doing that civil service. That's how my
right,
personal opinion, but
right. Well, and to me, it's not that I'm serving. You serve the community, uh, but my primary service is to uphold the Constitution.
sure.
I mean, that's and the best interest of that. And you're also, just because you're there and someone is brought before you doesn't mean that they're necessarily guilty.
Yeah.
Or
Innocent until proven guilty. That's the
that's
important
correct.
thing.
Absolutely. And you never forget that. And people need to be treated with that kind of respect, regardless of what they're charged with.
Sure.
So, it's kind of a dual life in a way. It's interesting. Like this weekend, I'd had a motion sent to me at the last minute on the night before a holiday weekend. So, I got to look at this because it needs to be timely, and really I could split some hairs and say denied because it was submitted too late, but or very late. But I'm not going to do that. But I was writing a order, this
Yeah.
weekend at home. So it's not just a couple of days a week that you're in there. It is officially, but you have search warrants that can be presented to you, or some civil stuff. So I try to make myself very available as well. It isn't that
Yeah.
I just follow strict hours for what's published, but you know it's important to be able to be accessible to the citizenry. and I think that's another thing. It's like I just don't blow that stuff off.
You
I handle
you
it.
brought up something that was I think it's something to highlight. A year ago, I happened to be there when you were able to do your oath and everything like that and get signed in or sworn in. Uh, do you remember what I said to you after that
You said a lot of stuff. I don't know which.
about the Constitution particularly?
You asked me what I thought was the most important part of our Constitution. I remember that. Which amendment was the Bill of Rights, which was most important. I remember asking her that.
Sure.
You'll have to refresh me. I don't know.
I asked you, I said, you did something that I've never done before. And of course, your quip was, well, I've done a whole lot of things that you've never done before. I said, no, but seriously, when it comes to the Constitution, you've done something that I've never done, which was you swore to uphold not only the United States Constitution, but also the Montana state
Right.
constitution,
That's true.
which
That's right.
is something that I think I never considered because I've never had to. I've never been at that level to have to consider it. But to see you guys all swear together, because you were all county servants, swearing not only to the United States Constitution, but the Montana state constitution. I thought
Yep.
that was kind of cool because you do have to uphold two constitutions.
Right.
And those are sometimes, and that's why we have Supreme Court and whatnot. We have some contradictions here or there. So it's very interesting that you have to, you got to abide by both and see what is the most important for this case and the sovereignty of the individual, the
Right.
liberties and the treasures that you were alluding to.
Well, and what amendment is the states' rights? 10th Amendment, right, of the U.S. Constitution
Gosh, don't
allows
know
some
beyond
states'
that.
rights, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, there's some duality there. The feds will always say that the U.S. Constitution overrides the Montana Constitution, and it's in some ways it's completely different.
Yeah.
Like in the Montana Constitution enumerates all of your rights. The U.S. Constitution says you have all rights unless said otherwise.
Right.
So a completely opposite way of looking at it. But those enumerated rights there's a lot of them.
Well, and some of them are regional specific. The United States at the time was 13 states, and now
Right.
we've got over the course of 250 years we have 50 plus territories. And in Montana, they explicitly identify water and water rights, which the United States Constitution does not do that. And it's very interesting, reading through that. I kind of glimpsed through it when you had it in your hand at the dinner table one day, and I was like, huh, didn't know that.
Yeah, no, it's and every time I'm trying to think how many times I've the first time to me that you swear an oath to the Constitution or you're sworn in for something is it's very meaningful. It is every time, but to me, it's every time after that first time is ceremonial because it didn't expire. And like I've said that before, that Constitution and the oath to it don't expire. So, but it still means just as much. A little bit different role, but every time I've sworn an oath to the Constitution, it's been to both the Montana and the U.S. Constitutions.
The comment that I would like to add there, because I think you're explaining it really well, but I've heard it, the best I've ever heard it was this. And before I say that, the fun fact is I've sworn more people to the Constitution than I have myself, being commissioned. So it's kind of a fun thing to kind of look back on. But the individual who's a great person, he's still serving right now. I hope to see a star on him one day, but he explained it. He said it's like going to a wedding with your spouse and you're watching the new couple take their vows. He said he goes, you're up there, you're so nervous and so excited, and it just kind of everything's a whirlwind, and it's finally just over, and you're like, whoa, what happened? And he goes, then you go back 5, 10, 15, 20 years later with your spouse, and you're sitting there and you're watching the couple before you do the exact same thing, and they're probably experiencing closer exactly the same you did. And he goes, now you get to look back and you go, that's what I remember. Those are the words, those are the promises, those are the intentions. And he said, like your point, it's a ceremonial thing, but it's a good reminder to those around you watching it that this is what you promised to do, and this is what you swore to do, and you will live by those values. And I think that's a really good analogy of seeing it. If you're so excited of the moment, but then looking back, it's really important to watch and to reconsume it and re-look and use that perspective to
Yeah,
understand.
I think that's really good. One of the things I think I would add to that is over time you have some life experiences that can really steal the meanings of those words too. You see some things happen, or you
Yeah.
watch some things happen, or now, like in this part, I'm part of it. So I do a ton of research. U.S. Supreme Court, Montana Supreme Court cases before I do anything, and which you should, but it's surprising how much research it does take because I don't want to be incompetent. That's the last thing in the world. That I abhor incompetence.
Yeah.
So I spend a lot of time educating myself prior to any kind of a court, you know, hearing or trial. I want to make sure it's done right. And if I err on something, if there's a question to it, I've got other judges that I can rely on for their input. But in the moment, if I have to make a decision, I always try to think about um, if I was to err, which direction would I err? And I always try to err, if I do, on the side of the defendant.
Yeah.
Because, you know, if the prosecutor in a criminal case um, needs to work a little bit harder, convicting somebody should be hard to do
Yeah.
because you're innocent until proven guilty. So, I don't want to violate someone's rights or give them a disadvantage. It doesn't mean that believe me, I'm not, I'm not exactly easy on those that are found guilty or plead guilty. I mean, you got to use some common sense there too, and there's some guidelines that you have to follow. So, you try to be fair but firm.
Two questions to close this out real quick. I'll start with probably the harder one. I hope it's harder. What's been the greatest lesson learned and or challenge that you've had over the last year being a JP? And if it, obviously if it's got something to do with an individual, try and make it as vague as possible, or
Oh,
you can
I won't.
pass. I
Yeah,
understand.
I won't. Well, you know what? And that's kind of funny because it's very tempting to talk to your mother about things,
Oh, well,
right?
the shoe's on the other foot, isn't it? Because she's had the same thing with students for the last 30
Exactly.
years.
You can't cross that line, and there's things that go on. It's like, oh my God, this was funny. I mean,
Yeah.
something that occurred, or yeah, I think I did a good job there, or man, this is a real brain teaser. How do I navigate this? Because I trust her
Yeah.
and she has a good perspective, but you can't do that.
Mhm.
You are on your own, or you rely on the other judges, or you rely on, all right, buckle down and do some research and see what's happened before. And there are a lot of resources out there for judges and attorneys as well. So I mean, it's the same resources really,
Yeah.
but learning how to use those and navigate those was a little clunky at first, even though I'd had law enforcement
Yeah.
experience. I had some new resources that I never had then, and which helps. It helps a lot.
And then the last one, what has been the most positive experience, maybe heartwarming, something that you just look back on the last year and you were like, man, that was pretty neat. That was cool.
You know, being able to see somebody get through their sentence and actually, and I think legitimately be able to start to turn their life around a little bit. And then a communication back to me after it was completely done,
Yeah.
a letter back to me thanking me for what I had done. It wasn't easy on her,
Yeah.
this person, but you know, I think it helped maybe to kind of a little bit of a tough love from kind of a heavy hand, and an update about how they're doing. And I think that's really what it's about, right? It's about, this whole thing is about changing behavior,
Yeah.
accountability, and hoping that someone can, if they're on one path, they can turn around and they can go up another one, and it's a positive one. And that's been very, very few of those. There's only been one, right? I mean, really, I can see others, but this was a communication back to me after the fact that they didn't need to do. And so that really, I thought they were sincere, but that really kind of cemented that a little bit more because they had nothing to gain by telling me that it was a done deal.
Yeah, that's a good answer. Well, that's your first year as JP, so here's to many more.